Hello everyone, happy Friday to you. My name is Amy Strickland. I'm with Elk Products. I serve in the tech support and marketing departments. Today we're going to be going over our C1M1 dual path alarm communicators. Joining me today is Brad Weeks, who is the manager of our technical support department, and he's going to be going over some of the setup and technical stuff with you. I'll be starting out here, so we'll just go ahead and dive right in. On your GoToWebinar control panel, you will find a section for questions. If you have questions, we certainly encourage you to type those questions in to us. We'll get to just as many of them as we can during the webinar. And if you have a question that we're not able to address, possibly because of time restraints, or maybe it's just a more involved question and we need to provide a follow-up, we will do that. You'll get that follow-up email early next week. That typically goes out on Monday. That will have any question and answer summary, a copy of this presentation, a link to a recording of the presentation, and any other resources that we feel like may be helpful to you. So again, today we're talking about our C1M1 alarm communicator. And so when we're talking about communicating alarm signals and emergency messages, we know that it's very crucial that those messages get through as quickly as possible. So it's important to have a very quick response to those events and get those signals sent in to the central station so that they can dispatch the proper authorities or medical personnel, whatever the case may be. And so that's what we've done with our C1M1, is looked at all the different ways that alarm communicators are slowed down. It could be dial capture, data bus decoding, cloud servers, that sort of thing, and we've taken those things out of the equation to significantly reduce the transmission time of those emergency messages. It has a direct connection to our M1 control via the serial port on board on an M1 Gold, and that allows us again to just eliminate those other things with other communicators that can cause delays or latency in getting those messages sent through. In addition to reducing the transmission time, we've also provided a dual path device. So we're able to send the signals over IP and cellular pathways, and that allows our communicator to provide a very reliable operation. This is full data communication to the central station. They're going to get full contact ID reporting, and that can be over an IP or a cellular pathway. So by having both pathways, if one pathway goes down, you have another pathway to be able to report the emergency messages, and also report the fact that one of your pathways went down. So that's a very good thing. That allows the system to be able to have that reliable communication. We're testing over both pathways, so if you're setting up your periodic tests, say that's going out daily, weekly, you're testing both of those pathways each time that test is occurring. The C1M1 is able to choose on its own which pathway is going to be best depending on what's been going on with the other pathways, and it can even report the outage of a pathway using the pathway that's left over. If there is an installation where you don't have IP, like there's not an internet connection or there's no cellular service, it is possible to configure the C1M1 to use only one pathway. But again, that's going to be your rare case. You want to have a good strong cellular signal. You want to have a good IP signal so that you're making the most of this dual path device. We offer the C1M1 communicator in two different models. We have the C1M1 for GSM. That supports GSM cellular networks. That's going to be AT&T, T-Mobile. If you're in Canada, that's going to be Rogers. We also offer the CDMA version, the C1M1 CDMA, which is on the Verizon network. So you can pick which one is going to work best based on the location and where you have, which network you have the strongest service on. Another benefit to the C1M1 is the remote access, and we've made that as hassle-free as possible for you. We've eliminated the need for port forwarding and complicated router configuration. We've also eliminated extra fees for remote access. So that's hopefully going to make you feel more like the guy on the right who's, you know, happy and confident, and instead of the guy on the left who is obviously very frustrated with his computer. Remote access is going to be a benefit to installers for programming purposes and management of the system. You can remotely program through the ElkRP software, and that can be done over the IP or the cellular pathway. This also allows you access to our ElkLink installer portal, which has your tools for managing your C1M1 communicators. ElkLink is where you're going to activate and view and manage all of your C1M1 communicators. So both of those remote access options are available through C1M1. And again, I was just talking about the web portal, which does have the management tools for installers, but the web portal also has some remote control capabilities for the end customer. And that's just based on your login. When you log in, depending on what permissions you have as to which screen you're going to get. So from the installer's point of view, you're going to be setting up the user in the system. They're going to, you know, get an email, and they'll be able to set up their username and password and give them access to the remote control side of the ElkLink web portal. So in addition to the web portal, ElkLink also offers app control of the M1. We have the ElkLink mobile app, which is available for Android and for iOS devices, and that allows you to view current status, arm and disarm the system. You can see recent events, that sort of thing. Also within the C1M1 is some capability for email and text message alerts, and you can set those up for arm, disarm, and alarm events. That's actually managed by the end customer, and Brad will go into more about how that works as we get further into the presentation. And again, so this is our ElkLink mobile app. I may not have mentioned before, but one very important point about the ElkLink mobile app is that it is free. It is a free app, again, for Android or iPhone devices or iPads, that sort of thing. And you just, you know, go download that from your marketplace or your app store. So that's going to allow you to have, you know, some basic controls over the M1 with a free app. So I'm going to take just a moment to address a question that's come in. So when we're talking about the CDMA, GSM, and the providers, you know, so Verizon is the network that you're going to need to be accessing for the CDMA unit. So the GSM works on like AT&T, T-Mobile, and again Rogers for Canada. The question was about US Cellular, and I don't know if US Cellular is just using Verizon's network or if they have their own network. If they are using Verizon's network, then it should work, but if it's a separate network, then that's not going to work for you. It does have to be Verizon for the CDMA. So let's talk a little bit about the unit itself and just, you know, get familiar with, you know, all the displays and connectors and that sort of thing. So you can see that the unit has a 7-segment display. That's used to provide information like how many bars of cellular service the unit has. It can display diagnostic information, error codes, and that sort of thing. It can also provide, it can display its IP address for you, things like that. There are some other LED indicators on the unit that will show you if you have cellular service, if your LAN is active, and if you are connected and syncing with the ElkLink servers. The unit comes in a nice compact housing. Our engineers designed this housing to very nicely mount in the ELK enclosures beside of the M1, and we'll go into that in just a little bit more detail here in just a moment. But you know, very compact, fits right in the 14 or 28-inch enclosures with the M1. We have a screw-in antenna. A stubby antenna is included with the unit, but you can unscrew that and use remote antennas screwed into that standard SMA connector on the C1M1 to provide better coverage for areas where the M1 area, where it's installed is not going to have the best coverage, maybe because it's in the basement or something like that. Then you can use a remote antenna to get around that problem. Looking at the connectors, the unit is powered from a 12-volt DC source, and we recommend powering that from the M1 aux power. Unless you've already got the M1 maxed out, then you can use an auxiliary power supply that has a common negative with the M1. We have a 3-pin connector for our serial connection, and we include a cable that when you get the unit's already going to be plugged into that connector, and it has the DB9 connection on the other end to go to the M1. And we also see an RJ45 for the LAN connection, as well as a mini B USB port, and that is for connecting directly to the M1, and that allows you to, you don't have to get on the customer's network, you don't have to unplug the unit to be able to make a direct connection to the M1 control for programming or diagnostic purposes. So this is just a general overview of the steps that you'll need to go through to set up and activate a C1M1 unit. We're going to dive into each one of these items in a bit more detail, but just to give you an overview, you do have to have a Telguard account. Telguard is actually the provider for the cellular service, so they provide access to the cellular network, and they also will be doing the billing for the cellular service for the unit. So ELK doesn't bill you for anything on the C1M1. Your billing goes through Telguard. So you do need to register and establish an account with Telguard if you don't already have one. You're also going to need to register for an ElkLink account so that we can give you access to the installer portal for activation and management of the units, and we have a form that you need to fill out and send to us to do that. So we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in just a moment. So once you've done those two things, if you have your Telguard account set up and you've got your ElkLink account set up, you've got the things that you need to actually be able to activate a unit. Once you go to actually put one in, the first thing that you're going to want to do is check your cellular service, your signal strength there, and you can do that with the unit itself, or less favorable, but you can use the cell phone for that, and again we'll go in more detail in just a moment. Then you would mount the unit and make all the wiring connections. You would then need to activate it on Telguard before you activate it on ElkLink. Once you've done those activations, then you're going to be able to make some just minor programming settings in the EIKRP software to get it communicating, and then you can do your testing. Again, we're going to dive into these items in more detail as we go along. So let's talk about the Telguard account. Telguard provides cellular service. They provide that setup and billing for all the C1M1 communicators. So you have to have a Telguard dealer account to activate C1M1 units. I know many of you may already be Telguard customers. You already have Telguard account set up. If you do, that's great. You don't have to set up a separate account. You just need to request to have the ELK TAP rate plan added to your account, and that's, you can give them a quick phone call or email to have them add that to your system, to your account, so that when you do activate a C1M1 unit, you're going to have that ELK TAP as your rate plan. If you don't have a Telguard account, it's really easy to sign up for one. They have a nice, quick, easy online form that you can fill out, and there's a link on this page. We'll also provide that link in a follow-up. And so you just fill that out, and they're going to set up your account and give you your login credentials and everything. And again, it's just important that once you've got that account set up, that you make sure that they know that you're working with C1M1 units and you need the ELK TAP rate plan. The next thing that you need to do is set up an ElkLink account, and again, we have a form that you fill out. It's a PDF form that you fill out and submit to us, and then we get your initial account setup information entered for you. And so you do need your Telguard dealer number to complete the ElkLink account application. So that's why you got to do the Telguard part first. If you don't already have an account with them, that's step one, is getting an account with them. We need your dealer number with them to complete the ElkLink setup. And it's important also to note that when you're filling out this form, we do ask for some information from your central station. They need to have a SureGuard IP receiver. And so when you're providing the IP addresses and port information for your central station receivers, you need to make sure that they're giving you information for a SureGuard IP receiver, because that's the only way that the C1M1 can send reports to your central station is through a SureGuard receiver. Again, we will be sure to, in the follow-up, send you links to the account application and the email address that would need to be sent to. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about testing the cellular signal. This is very important that you do this before you mount it in the proposed location, because this is going to let you know whether or not you need a remote antenna, or if you're going to be getting good enough cell service where the unit's going to be mounted. So you can do this by temporarily just powering up the C1M1 unit off of 12-volt DC source and holding it close to the proposed location. On the 7-segment display, you are going to get an indication of how many bars you're getting. It will show you the letter B and then a number following. You need to have at least 2 bars, any less than that, you're not going to have a reliable cell signal. You know, the more bars the better, obviously, but 2 would be what we would consider the minimum suggested number of bars. If it's not possible for you to have the C1M1 powered up where you're going to be mounting it for whatever reason, you can use a cell phone to see how many bars you're getting on the phone, but the phone has to be on the same cellular network as the C1M1. So if you have an AT&T phone and you're working with the CDMA unit of the C1M1 that's on the Verizon network, your AT&T phone is not going to give you a clear picture of how many bars you're getting on the Verizon network. You've got to be on the same network. So if you're using the CDMA, if you have a Verizon phone, then that would be an acceptable way to test the signal. With the GSM, again, it's going to be AT&T, T-Mobile, or Rogers that you're going to be looking at the signal strength. And again, this would be, you know, if you just can't use the C1M1 itself to get the signal strength, then the cell phone is an acceptable alternative, but we definitely prefer what the C1M1 unit is getting over what a cell phone's getting as a better indicator. And so if you are having problems with cell service where you're going to be mounting the C1M1, a remote antenna is a great solution. You're going to get a better signal, and it's going to be, you know, one wire to run to get, you know, that extended coverage for your cellular signal. The C1M1 has to be mounted in the M1 enclosure to meet UL requirements. This also makes it more secure, so we definitely recommend mounting it in the enclosure with the M1, and we realize that that can be sometimes in a place that doesn't have the best cell service. So we offer a remote antenna. It's the WA003. It has a 6-meter cable, which is, you know, roughly 21 feet. Magnetic base, and again, we're just looking at an SMA male connector. So this is one remote antenna. If you have, you know, other remote antennas that you've used with other cellular units that you like, most likely they'll be fine to use with the C1M1 as well. And again, it's, you know, just making sure it has the right connector, and limiting the number of connections is also pretty important. So we would favor a remote antenna that was a one-piece unit like what you see on the screen here, versus one that's an antenna that you have to have an extension cable, because now you have 2 connection points, and each one of those points reduces your gain on your signal. Okay, so at this point I'm going to address a couple questions, and then I'm going to turn the presentation over to Brad. But first I do want to look at a couple questions here. So we have a question here about using the C1M1 as IP only. It is possible to set it up that way. But if you are looking at a situation where you only have IP and you don't have good cellular service, you may want to consider just using the M1 XCP, and there are definitely places, situations where the XCP is still, the best way to go versus the C1M1, and then obviously there's lots of reasons to use the C1M1 instead. But again, if you're looking at an IP only, you may want to, what benefits are you looking for from the C1M1 if you're not being able to use both paths and really weigh your decision there. And we'll give you some more information to kind of help you navigate those types of scenarios as we go through. Another question here about Telguard is going to be the one billing for the cellular service, and that's regardless of whether you have the GSM or the CDMA. So you don't really have to do anything with Verizon or AT&T or anything like that. You're getting your cell service through Telguard. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Brad.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Certainly do appreciate that, and we appreciate everyone's time and attendance today. So let's continue on. Bear with me one second. There we go. Let's talk about the actual physical connection between the C1M1 and the M1 system. So as we can see here in our picture, we have our M1 system, and it also can work with the M1 EZ8. If you do have the M1 EZ8, you will need the EZ8 MSI interface. But today we're going to primarily talk about connection to the ELK M1. So the C1M1 gets its power from the M1, from the auxiliary terminals on the left-hand side. It's a 2-wire hookup. Make sure to observe polarity. The next connection is the RS-232 wire. This is a 3-wire serial cable that's included with the C1M1. This is about a 3-foot cable, and it is not possible to extend that cable. Do not extend that cable at all. We give you a 3-foot cable. We would typically want the C1M1 mounted inside the metal enclosure. We're going to show you a picture of that here in just a second. But you could have it outside as long as you don't extend more than 3 feet. The next cable we have connection is the network cable, our local area network. This is not included, but this distance here from the C1M1 to the router can vary. You're only using LAN restrictions as far as how far you could run this particular patch cable from the C1M1 to your router. In the ELK enclosures, we have the ELK SWB14 and the ELK SWB28 enclosures that you can mount the C1M1 into. There's a knockout on the top of each enclosure that the antenna will protrude, as you can see in our diagram here. And then we include the mounting screw. It's a single screw that you would fasten to the side of the metal enclosure. And then the C1M1 simply slides onto the keyhole and secures to the enclosure with the included wire tire to our, we call it a basket handle on the bottom of the unit. So it fits very nice and snug inside the 14 and the 28-inch enclosure. Now, like I said, for some reason, if you need to mount it outside, that's fine, but you cannot go more than the 3-foot limitation on the serial cable. And the end of the serial cable plugs into the M1 on the upper right-hand corner, right here, right under the telephone connection. And that is your basic connections between the M1 and the C1M1. Very simple. Now, once you have your unit and you have it mounted, and we've tested the signal strength, we need to register with Telguard. So what we have here, we're on the Telguard's website, and under the register subscriber, you will enter the serial number of the C1M1, and it's located on the side. It's a white barcode sticker that has the serial number, and the PIN number. So right here we have our serial number, and that gets entered in this field here. Next, you'll have a screen that has some customer information, like site information, for instance, if you needed to reference that. You enter the client account number, and we recommend using the reporting account number that will be transmitted to your central station. Just trying to keep it as simple as possible, referencing central station number for the client number for easy lookup and so forth. As Amy mentioned earlier, the rate plan has already been set up, and you should have a drop down that will appear, and it'll have ElkTap as your rate plan. If you do not see that, just contact Telguard support and they'll be glad to add that to your account. Now once you have your Telguard information entered, we then go and log into ElkLink. Now under ElkLink, you will have the new tab. First we have the administrative and device tabs at the top. So under device, we want to click new, and we need to make sure that your login authority has the level of either an alarm company administrator or alarm company regular in order for you to be able to do this. There is an option for view only, which wouldn't allow you to actually set up the C1M1. So we click new. Under the device information tab, some of the information's already been pre-set up for you, like your service provider, your alarm company, and so forth. But the areas that are not grayed out, like for instance device MAC, that's located on the right-hand side of the unit there on the white barcode sticker we see on the right side of the screen. The device PIN, system name is whatever you want to call it, the Smiths, the Jones, whatever you want to define the system name is, that's totally up to you. The reporting account number, that's your central station reporting account number. We'll need to enter that there. Now in some cases central station may require a heartbeat interval, and that's only if they provide that to you and they require it. If not, we can leave that information blank. Once we have all the information entered, we want to authenticate the device. After the authentication is done, we want to confirm activation. And once we have our device authenticated and confirmed, the unit should be registered and ready for operation. Now in ElkRP or through keypad programming, we need to enter some information. So in ElkRP, we would right-click on telephones and create a telephone number. For programming, the name, that's optional. The reporting format is 6 for IP. That's very important. We need to have that set to 6 for IP. Dial attempts is 1. Under report the following using this number, the first and the last option should always be checked. The middle 3 are optional depending if you want the zone bypasses and troubles or opening and closings reported. It's no problem having all 5 of them checked, because under the report codes in RP is where you actually tell the system which items are going to get reported. So it's okay to have all 5 of them checked, no problem. Now under select areas, you must have at least area 1 checked. If it's multi-area system, go ahead and check areas 2 through 8 depending. Alright, so once we have the telephone set up, we send that information to the M1. Now we need to set up the communicator. And under communicator in RP, there's several areas there. And right now we're looking at zone RCs. That's probably one of the most important ones. So you see in the zone RC, we have our zones. We have an alarm pulse column. And if it's a 0, 0 in the pulse column, it means it's not enabled to send a signal if that zone generated the alarm. When you enter a 0, 1, that enables your alarm, your contact ID, and your CIA signals. That enables them, so if zone 1 created the alarm, it would then send that signal to your central station. So 00 is disabled, a 01 enables the report code. You can also set up the restoral, the bypass, and trouble, and this is selectable per zone. So there may be certain zones that you don't want the trouble transmitted, but some that you do. So it's entirely customizable by zone. Now, if you need to set all zones at one time, you can right-click on Alarm Pulse and set that entire column to 01 or clear the entire column. So it's a nice little feature there in RP in order to quickly enable or disable certain report codes depending on your installation. Now, as Amy mentioned earlier, this is a dual path communicator, so it's sending signals over IP as well as cellular depending on which pathway is available at that time. If you enable the daily or weekly or monthly test, we call it automatic test, if you enable that, and we certainly recommend that you do, it's going to send that test over both pathways. So if you set it up for a daily test, which we would set the automatic test communicator every 1 day at a particular time, we make sure automatic test is set to 01 to enable that code to get sent out. When it sends a signal, it sends it over the internet as well as over the cellular network. So it's testing both communication paths at the same time. Your central station will actually receive 2 signals. Now, in the event that the one pathway is down, let's say for some reason the internet is down and an alarm is generated, the C1M1 automatically reverts to sending that signal over cellular. It also lets the central station know that one pathway is down. Think of the benefits of that. It's a dual path communicator. It just told your central station that, hey, one path is down, but I'm still here. I just sent you a signal letting you know that one path is down. I'm still communicating. Everything's great. Central station can then decide whether or not to alert the installation company or the homeowner to the fact that one pathway is down. Wouldn't think it would be necessary because the C1M1's proven that it's still communicating. It's sending signals, so all is good at that time. Now we can force the system to send an automatic test through keypad programming. So instead of waiting, an example earlier, instead of waiting till that 12:35 in the morning to see if the signal went through, we can go to a keypad and go into menu 8, which is system settings. We can go to number 84 for system test. Menu 3 is communicator, send test signal. When you press the right arrow key, the first item there is send test silently. Press the right arrow key again, and the C1M1 is going to send two tests. It's going to test the IP as well as cellular. You'll get a log entry at your central station indicating that the test was received. You can see we have some central station information below. So that's how we can manually test signals. At this time, do we have any questions? We've gone over the physical connections, which are really super simple, and setting up ElkLink and Telguard. Do we have any questions, Amy?
We do have quite a few questions. Some of these we'll get to in more detail, but I'll go ahead and just kind of address them with a broad stroke at the moment.
Okay.
So we've got questions about compatibility with things like Control4, Crestron, that sort of thing. The C1M1 does provide a non-secure or unencrypted port for connecting to devices over the local network, just like the XCP does. So if you're familiar with how the XCP works and integrating with something like Control4 or Crestron, then it's going to be basically the same thing with the C1M1. You have a port that you can enable and use that port with the IP address to interface with those things. Also, you know, while we're on the subject of third parties, the C1M1 does also allow connectivity with the third-party apps, eKeyPad and M1 Touch Pro. I had a question about one of the connections on the board. When we were looking at the power connector, there are a couple extra terminals there labeled I and O. Currently those do not have any functionality. Those are something that our engineers built into the product for future use. So right now they're not used for anything. We may in the future make use of those for something else, but again that's just something that the engineers built in to allow future expansion for the product. So can an end user set up an account with ElkLink and Telguard? And the question, the answer to that is no. This is not an end user or DIY product. It's not, you know, for self-install. A couple of reasons, you know, one of the main things is that you have to have a Telguard account to even get an ElkLink account, and Telguard dealer accounts are limited to professional installers. We require that you have that Telguard account information already set up before we'll give you an account on ElkLink. So, you know, just from that initial point of the accounts that you need, that's not something that's going to be available to a DIY installer. You are going to have to work with a professional installer or you know, a central station that can provide you access to that information. But again, we consider this to be a professional grade product. It is not designed for DIY self-installation.
All right, very good, excellent, good questions. All right, so let's take a look at the ElkLink installer portal. We're going to look at the view edit device information. So let's say, for instance, you have your Telguard account, you have your ElkLink account, you have your C1M1 registered and it's working fine. We need to maybe edit a piece of information. So once you log in to your ElkLink portal, you click devices, and under the device tab you'll see all, if you have multiple C1M1s, you'll see them listed. They're by the MAC address. So we click on the MAC address and it'll pull up the screen that we're looking at here that contains the MAC, various bits of information including the end user info and the system info and so forth. And if there's something that we need to edit, we click the edit device at the bottom, and that'll pull up, that will allow us to edit this screen. Let's say, for instance, we need to change a reporting account number or an IP address or something, or we need to add the DNS or the heartbeat. We can certainly do that from this screen. Another important bit of information on this screen is the remote disarming code. The remote disarming code is required for proper operation of the ElkLink web portal and the apps. Enter a valid ARM disarm code that exists in the M1. Now we recommend setting up a separate code for ElkLink for logging purposes. In the installation for the C1M1 we talk about setting up user 199. That's the last available supported user code in the M1 list, and we suggest 199 because it is so far up in the list. It would be less likely for that code to get changed or deleted or something, so that you wouldn't have to log back in order to create a new one. So we create a remote ARM disarm code, and we've used our default 3456, but you can certainly set up another 4-digit code, and that's going to be prompted for when setting up your apps and so forth. So it's a very good piece of information. If your app isn't arming the system or disarming, more than likely it's because the remote programming code hasn't been set up yet. Now for your end user, you would click Administrative under End Users. Set up your end user information there, their first, last name, email, their mobile number, and the carrier, and so forth. Under the MAC, the device MAC, there'll be a drop down so you can select their C1M1, because you may have multiple C1M1s, only the ones that haven't been registered yet, or no, I'm sorry, said that wrong. Yes, only the ones that have not been assigned end users will appear in the list. So once we have the required information in each field, the end user will receive an email invitation to set up their username and password to ElkLink. So your login information gives you the ability to set up, configure, and edit a C1M1 as an installer. Your end user will get a username and password to the site so that they can log in from their PC, so that they can get the ARM disarm status, they can check the log, they can also set up and manage the email and text notification. Unlike with the M1 XEP where the installer set up this information, now the end user can set up the push notifications, and they can set up 10 different email or text notifications, and what will be sent out is ARM, disarm, and alarm. Very basic, very generic, but we tried to keep it simple to let them get notified of an event, but yet not overcomplicate it so that it would be easy for them to configure and manage. So here's where we set up from our address book our notifications, new contacts, and so forth. All right, I'm going to take just a second and do a quick comparison between C1M1 and the XEP. For reporting purposes, both of them will support IP reporting. The C1M1 has to use a SureGuard 3 receiver. The XEP can use the SureGuard or the Osborne-Hoffman. Cellular reporting, only the C1M1 will support cellular. Remote programming over local area connection or through the internet, both C1M1 and XEP will support that. Over cellular, only with the C1M1 can you program the system over cellular. Support of direct connections, yes with the C1M1 because we have the mini B USB port on board. With the XEP, you would have to disconnect the XEP in order to connect directly to the C1M1. The apps, there are third-party apps for the iPhone, iPad, as well as the Droid. Both of those now work through C1M1 as well as the XEP. Elk offers a free mobile app with the C1M1. Notifications for email and text notifications through the C1M1, it's configured by the end user, and like I said, that's for ARM, disarm, and alarms. With the XEP, the installer would have to configure the emails. Now you do have up to 16 custom email messages. Any questions at this time, Amy?
We've got a couple of questions about third-party stuff that I think we can address on the next slide.
Yep, absolutely. So let's go ahead and dive right into that. So we're going to talk about our IP integration partners. The C1M1 provides integration with software and interface partners via the IP port on the local area network that supports the M1's ASCII protocol. We've got a few of them listed here, AMX, Control4, Crestron, and so forth. They connect to the non-secure port or the non-encrypted port of the C1M1. So this will be for local area connection and communication between our partner manufacturers. That's supported through C1M1. Through the XEP, that was done through port 2101. So we still have that capability of integrating and communicating with our integration partners. I'd like to take a moment to talk about a configuration utility. Now, for the most part, you do not need this utility to set up a C1M1, but there may be certain times that you have to use it in order to configure an inbound port setting or to enable the discovery for AMX and Control 4. So if you are integrating with one of our third-party integration partners, there may be the chance that you have to enable device discovery, and that's located here. So using the C1M1 utility is the only way to enable that. And then there's some diagnostic tools available here and so forth from the utility. The tamper switch, there's a tamper switch built into the C1M1, and you can set it up to enable or disable the tamper. There's a front and a back tamper, I believe. We have some local settings as far as enable report of a LAN failure or a cellular failure. By default, it's 3 minutes, and then it sends a signal to central station. You can disable that. You can uncheck these boxes and disable that, and it wouldn't get the alert, but with your dual path communicator, if one reporting path goes down, we have a backup. And once again, do we have questions that we may have overlooked at this point? Amy, do we have any questions?
Yeah, sorry, I was talking there and I was muted.
No problem.
I was talking about the C1M1 utility and how you get that. We do have that as a download from our website, but you do need to request a link to that download from tech support. So if you send an email to techsupport@elkproducts.com or to training@elkproducts.com, if you need that utility, we can send you a link to it. In most cases, you're not going to need it, and that's why it's not just a readily available download, but we can send you a link to download that upon request. So we have some questions here about, we talked about the M1 XCP and the C1M1 and you compared them. We definitely have some questions about is it possible to use both of them at the same time? And the answer there is no. You're going to use one or the other, and the reasoning, is because it's using the main serial port on the M1, and you can only have one connection there. So, again, for the most part, you're going to be able to make a clear choice based on your, resources available as far as good internet connection, good cellular connection. If you have both of those, then the C1M1 is going to be a good fit. If you don't have cellular or you're not looking to use the cellular side of the C1M1, we would, again, I'd ask you to, and maybe with guidance from tech support, try to make a decision as to whether or not the XCP will fill your needs. And we certainly are not taking the XCP out of our product line. We still feel like that is a very viable product. It has a lot of great benefits. So we didn't design C1M1 to replace the M1 XCP. We consider them to be two different products, each with their own benefits and suited applications. So are there plans to provide more end-user notifications? So we're talking about the email and text messages. At this time, that is limited to ARM, disarm, and alarm. I know that that's something we've had some requests for. Our engineers have, taken those requests from tech support and customer services. We're getting those, and that is something that they are looking into, but it certainly couldn't provide any information as to what may change there, if anything, and any kind of timeline. But our engineers are, very responsive to customer requests, so they hear you on that one, and looking into what may be possible to expand on that. But at this time, arm, disarm, and alarm, and you can get that via email or text. That's what you're getting through C1M1. And that's, you know, one thing that you may want to look at, especially if you're looking at, you know, IP only C1M1 versus XCP. If you want to have, you know, more customized email notifications, you know, that's where, you know, we would steer you to the XCP versus the C1M1. And again, if you were, you know, using IP only, there's a lot of things to look at there. Let's see, I know we've got a lot of questions coming in. So C1M1 does work with eKeypad. I'm not sure if it works with all versions of it. I think it's working with the Pro version. I'm not sure if they've added support to that to any of the other versions of eKeypad. You should be able to find that information on their website, and we'll try to dig that up for you and provide a more detailed answer in the follow-up. Local access to ElkRP is through, can be through the USB port, the little mini USB that we talked about. You can get a direct connection that way. Also, you can connect over the local network. So local access could be USB, it could be over the local network. As far as remote access, that's going to be either over, you know, well, that's going to be through the proxy, and that could be IP or cellular. Bear with me as I'm reading through all these questions, and, you know, keep them coming. If you have questions, now's definitely the time to ask them. Yeah, I think that was, just looking here, I think that I may have just answered one question with the other question. As far as the C1M1 utility is concerned, you do have to be local with the USB to connect with that utility if you were to want to make a change, say, to the tamper setting, or the need to do the discovery, that sort of thing.
Oh, that brings up a good point. Let's say, for instance, the C1M1 is on a local area network that you do not have access to. You cannot connect your computer. You can still connect to the system through that mini USB port. So just because you can't get a connection over the local area network, you now can connect. Basically, it would be like doing a direct connect to the system.
Right, so, you know, that definitely helps eliminate those situations where you may not be able to get on the customer's network because you don't have the password or whatever. You're not going to have to worry about that. You just plug into the USB and go. So remote access to the M1, and again, let's you know, concentrate that on the ElkRP first. You're going to be able to do the remote access through a proxy connection, and that could go over the IP pathway or the cellular pathway. Now, I mean, through the proxy, you don't have to worry about port forwarding or anything like that. But it is possible to set up a secure port on the C1M1 and set up a passphrase for the secure connection. The ElkRP software does allow you, if you want to make that kind of connection, to input that data once you've set it up in the utility. But you're going to have to do a port forward to do that. And so, you know, while that is possible, you know, again, just maybe weighing the reasoning behind doing that versus just going through the proxy connection, which eliminates the network setup. But the option is there. And again, just talking about the security on that, and maybe if we could hop back to this C1M1 utility page. So you can see in this drop down you would have an option for enabling this encrypted port, which by default is 2102. Of course, you can change that port number, and then you're setting up a passphrase there, and that's going to allow you to have an encryption key, basically, that you're going to then need to put into your ElkRP software before it would allow a connection to that port directly, again, versus the proxy connection, which eliminates all that extra setup. But they did put the provision there for you. I had quite a few questions about that. Okay, if there are any other questions, we have a couple of minutes left here. I think I've been able to address most of the questions, at least in some fashion. Yeah, okay, so where in ElkRP do you enter the passcode? Bear with me just a second here, and I'll see if I can get that pulled up for you. Okay, so in the ElkRP software, if you have C1M1 selected under Network Adapter, then you can check this option here to use secure port, and there's where you're going to put the passphrase. So again, you're only going to see that when you have the C1M1 selected here, but there again, you know, the option exists, but you may want to weigh your options as to why you would want to do that versus the proxy connection, which just eliminates all that extra setup. But we appreciate your time with us. We hope that this was helpful and that we were able to, you know, show you some things with the C1M1 if you had that maybe you hadn't seen before, or you know, answer those questions for you if you were trying to figure out whether or not to use this product. We feel like it's a really good product for the M1 to help you get past those issues of, you know, POTS lines going away and, you know, needing to have multiple pathways to really have secure communications. And like I said, you know, the engineers really looked at what they felt like was slowing down some of the other communicators and addressed those here, you know, with eliminating dial capture and data bus decoding and that sort of thing. So definitely a product worth looking at. You know, if you want more information, we definitely have information online. You can send any questions that you might have after the webinar to training@elkproducts.com. We'll be sending you a follow-up email early next week, and hope everyone has a great weekend. I want to thank Brad Weeks for being with us today and always so helpful with these webinars. So thank you, Brad, and thank everyone for attending. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Amy. Everyone take care.